What's up everyone, Mike here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at a handful of games and seeing how they load and run on the Xbox Series X versus the Xbox One X. I've had the Xbox Series X since launch and I've been putting it through its paces on these backwards compatible games. One thing to note is that some Xbox S/X games show up in the file info as Xbox One Gen 9 aware games. And from what I can tell, these are actually more so enhanced backwards compatible games. I don't believe that these are the same as Xbox Series X native games or Xbox Gen 9 games. So keep that in mind whenever we get to the ARC portion of this video. Another thing to pay attention to is the app model shown right above the red rectangle. GDK is what developers need to use to make a native Xbox Series X game. So the first game that we're going to look at is Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2. Right here we're going to do the load times, and I picked this game because it was one of the more demanding 360 backwards compatible games that did not run at a solid 60 frames per second on the One X. And even though the load times is pretty fast on the Series X, they're not that much slower on the One X. Another thing to note is that every single game shown in today's video is run on the local hard drives on both the One X and the Series X. So there's no external SSD, no trickery, and it's exactly the raw hardware. So here we can see, even just running through, the One X is already dropping frames. It's not bad, but you'll notice that once we get into a firefight, you'll notice that the One X really struggles, where the Xbox Series X is just a solid 60 throughout. This isn't really that surprising when you consider that the Ubisoft developers have gotten a lot better hold of the multi-core CPUs in the 360 at this point, so it's going to be harder to emulate on the Xbox One X line of consoles. And once again here, we see another firefight, and again, just constant drops to the mid-50s on the Xbox One X. And you'll see here in just a few seconds where I set the bomb and we're going to see a massive drop on the Xbox One X. This game is probably the best Ghost Recon on the Xbox 360. So, I think it's really awesome that we're able to get a solid 60 on the Series X and likely the Series S. It's also interesting that the Xbox One just never really recovers from the explosion. Okay, so in this scene, I originally thought that the rain and heavy use of alpha effects might make it a bit more taxing on the GPU side, but it still comes down to emulating the CPU. And all of this just points to a CPU bottleneck on the Xbox One X emulation, because whenever it's just flying and there's no action, it's a solid 60 on the One X. However, whenever the action picks up again, we see AI, we see physics, we see explosions, again we see drops on the Xbox heavily optimized game on any console. And even though they claim to have a Series X update that was released around the Series X launch, it's a Gen 9 aware game, meaning that it's not really a Gen 9, it's not really a native Series X title. So even though 31 seconds doesn't seem like it's that fast to load into the game, I'm going to speed up the loading here and you'll see how much longer it takes on the Xbox One X. Another thing I should point out is that this is entirely an offline game that I'm loading up. That way there are no network interference when it comes to loading in the game or the world. So 31.68 seconds compared to 2 minutes and 5 seconds. That is a massive, massive leap when we look at what we got on the last generation. And honestly, I've spent countless hours playing Ark and I never once noticed how long it took to load because that's all we knew. I mean, I knew it took a long time, but I wasn't really bothered by it because I didn't know any better. Now, what we're seeing here is something of an oddity. I can't explain it. I ran so many frame rate tests that for whatever reason, it's registering screen tearing even when there's no screen tearing. And for whatever reason, it's not registering it correctly on the Series X, but it's registering it correctly on the One X. The game does not tear this bad on the Series X, and I can tell you from firsthand experience and how much time I played that it runs a lot better on the Series X. So I've tried different videos, I've tried different configurations with the frame rate tools, and no matter what, it just shows these oddities. The mode that it's showing now is completely uncapped, no VSync, no adaptive VSync. So the only way I was able to get these measurements to work correctly is to enable a full locked VSync on both consoles, and you'll see here how much better it runs on the Series X. We don't see any frame dips, it's a solid 30 frames per second, properly frame paced, and it honestly runs really, really good. To go back to the whole Gen 9 aware configuration that I pointed out earlier, even though the developers behind Ark pointed to all of these enhancements for the Series X, I don't really notice them. I did a bunch of pixel counting and all that I got was a 1440p resolution in all of my counts. I didn't see anything that was 4K or anything close to 4K. And everything from draw distance to shadow quality to lighting quality, all of that seemed to be a perfect match for the One X in the high detail mode. Another thing I should point out is that due to the random nature of where you spawn and also the random nature of the world, it was really hard to get like for like run-throughs. Now, this V-synced gameplay is online because I wanted to capture online gameplay of tall structures because it's large structures that typically stress the game the most. And you'll notice that it doesn't matter if I get close to a large structure or if I'm running out in the field. No matter what I'm doing, I don't drop any frames on the Series X. But the One X is horribly inconsistent, dropping down to 20 frames per second, up to 30, and everything in between. So if you're still playing this game, I definitely recommend getting a Series X because you'll get a much better experience on that system. So the next game I picked out was Kingdom Hearts 3. I wanted to pick this game out because it's beautiful, but on the One X, it doesn't run great no matter what mode you play. There's a smooth mode, which has horrible frame pacing, and then there's an unlocked mode, which just never hits 60 frames consistently on the One X. When it comes to the loading, it's not bad on the Series X. 19.65 seconds is pretty quick, especially when we compare it to how slow it's loading on the One X. It actually took so long on the One X that I had to freeze the last frame of the Series X video because I underestimated how long it was going to take to load. Switching over to the frame rate, it doesn't seem to be bad at first on the One X. You'll see that it's a lock 60, but the moment there's any action, we start to see some drop frames. And the more that happens on the screen, the more it drops. And anytime there's any kind of action, it's just not smooth whatsoever on the One X. But again, on the Series X, it is buttery smooth all throughout. Even though this isn't the most demanding scene, I still wanted to include it because this seemed to be the best running battle that I've come across. Plus, it's really beautiful. And it's also pretty impressive with the effects. It looks like they're mirroring the geometry beneath the floor to create reflections. And I think it looks great. Now, this portion, I'm showing a little bit of the cutscenes, and the reason I'm showing the cutscenes is to demonstrate how they're locked at 30 frames, but again, there's frame pacing issues with both versions. Again, here's another battle. It's one of the early battles in the game. Everything is early in this game, so there's no spoilers, even though this isn't a new game anymore. And you'll just see how the frame rate is down to the low 50s the entire way through on the One X. You'll also notice that the Series X provides 16 times anisotropic filtering on all of these games throughout. Whereas on the Xbox One X, the texture filtering is closer to 4 times anisotropic filtering, and it's really not that great. The resolution in both versions is 1440p, so it does look a little soft on a 4K display, but overall it looks really, really nice. The only thing missing is motion blur and some advanced lighting effects. So this next scene I wanted to include because it shows a lot of alpha effects on screen. You can see even when traversing the area, we see drops on the One X. Now to be fair, when you're just running around, it runs pretty good on the One X. We still see some dips, but it's nowhere near as bad when we see fire on the screen or... Now the next game is Witcher 3. And this one is really, really interesting. So first of all, we're loading into a new game, and they show this recap cutscene to remind the player of where they are in the story. So I'm including all of that because I wasn't able to skip it. I can only imagine that without this recap scene, the load times might be quicker on both consoles. But as soon as the scene is done, the Series X just loads in. There's no load bar that really sits there. Whereas on the One X, it's still loading. I'm actually able to go to the next portion of my video on the Series X while the One X is still loading. To be clear, both versions are running in the high frame rate mode, so they're running at the exact same settings. And finally, after 1 minute and 6 seconds, it's loaded up on the One X. So moving over to fast travel, this is equally impressive. So I picked the furthest point that was possible because I wanted to have the longest load time that I can try to push on these systems. And in just under 4 seconds, the Series X loaded. It was amazing. Like, you can't even read the hint. And the One X takes more than 4 times the amount of time to load. It's truly awesome. So moving over to performance, again, both versions are running at the frame rate mode. And at first, both versions do a good job at holding 60 frames per second. We see some single frame dips on the One X, but It's honestly a really good showing, and I was surprised. It's pretty clear that CD Projekt Red has made a lot of progress with their engine on last-gen consoles. Now we're moving over to a scene just traversing on horseback. And again, it's a pretty solid 60 on both systems. On the One X, we see some drops whenever you're loading in new geometry, but they're only single frame drops, and it's nothing major. Now, during this cutscene, there's a lot of alpha effects, there's a lot of geometry, it's switching between scenes abruptly, so there's a lot of assets that need to be loaded in. And still, both versions are running really well. The Xbox One X is seeing some single frame dips, but it's not bad at all. Now here, with more alpha effects filling the screen, more high quality character models, we are seeing larger dips on the Xbox One X. So you might be wondering, what's the biggest difference between the One X and the Series X? Well, the high resolution mode also has a dynamic resolution. And on the One X, it can vary between 1080p and 1332p. While on the Xbox Series X, every single screenshot that I counted ended up at 1800p when running in performance mode. That is a huge jump over what we see in the last generation. Now in this next scene, you'll see the one area where the Xbox One X really struggles to hit 60 frames, or even come close. In larger towns, where there's a lot of geometry and a lot of NPCs both hammering the CPU, the game just cannot run at 60 frames on last-gen hardware. Whereas on the Xbox Series X during this run, it's a 60 frame per second frame rate throughout. And again, running at 1800p. So this is a really impressive leap between the improved image quality, the improved load times, and the improved performance on The Witcher 3 before the next-gen patch even hits next year. So the last game in our list is Wolfenstein 2. Now, I picked this game because you can set it to a locked 4K resolution. And as we'll see later on, that makes a huge difference between the dynamic resolution that is set by default on the Xbox One X. Now, at first, the load times, and honestly, again, I underestimated how long the loading would be on the Xbox One X. It's only 12.08 seconds on the Xbox Series X. And it takes so long on the Xbox One X that I again had to freeze the last frame of the Series X video just to drag it out long enough for the One X in this comparison video. So it's just over 12 seconds on the Series X, and it's 1 minute and 38 seconds on the One X. That is a huge leap, considering these backwards compatible games don't use the decompression block. They don't use any of the advanced hardware when it comes to SSD or features. This is just raw SSD speeds. So this first scene really demonstrates the difference between the One X and the Series X. This is again running at a native 4K resolution, and we never see it coming close to 60 frames on the One X. Actually, while I was recording this footage, the One X was sounding like a jet engine. So this game was pushing that system hard, and you can really tell with these frame rates. Doesn't matter how much action is on the screen, the frame rate never buckles, at least in this scene, on the Series X. This next scene has a lot of action, has a lot of geometry, a lot of destructible environments, and a lot of AI. So I figured it'd be another good test bed to demonstrate the difference in processing power these two systems provide. And also, I want to remind everyone that are watching these frame rate differences, backwards compatible games on the Xbox Series X don't take advantage of any of the hardware features, not even the IPC improvements found in the RDNA 2 architecture in the GPU on the Series X. So basically what we're looking at here is pretty much equivalent to a 12 teraflop GCN GPU in the Series X when running these Xbox One X games. So of all the footage that I captured and analyzed, this area was easily the most taxing that I found so far. We have alpha effects left and right with all of the fire and smoke. We have AI all over the place firing at us. We have this robot dog that's spewing fire at us. We have volumetric lights. We have a ton of geometry with the surrounding buildings. And still, we're getting a locked 60 frames on the Series X so far, at a locked 4K resolution. Whereas on the One X, we're seeing the biggest drops, where it's hovering between the mid 40s to the low 30s, and even dropping a touch below 30 frames per second. Now, the Series X will drop very so slightly in this scene when there's a lot of alpha effects on the screen. That points to a memory bandwidth limitation. And honestly, it's barely noticeable, and it recovers very, very quickly. Considering everything that game is pushing at you, it's really impressive to how well it holds to 60 frames per second at a rock-solid 4K resolution. So there you have it. We looked at 5 games pretty quickly, all showing improvements in load times, sometimes by insane amounts, and also showing noticeable improvements to performance, where 60 frames is pretty much standard in every single one of these games on the Series X. It's really amazing what the backwards compatible team has been able to accomplish. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. And we also have a Patreon if you'd like to join and help us continue making awesome Xbox content. Let me know in the comments below if there are any other games you'd like me to take a look at, or if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. Until the next time, you guys take care.